Draft Local Government Finance Act 1988, Prescription of Non-Domestic Rating Multipliers, England Regulations 2026.
Is it the wish of the committee that the instruments be debated together?
Aye.
It is. I will now call the Minister to move the first motion and to speak to both instruments. At the end of the debate, I'll put the question on the first motion and then ask the Minister to move the second motion formally. I call the Minister to move the first motion.
I beg to move that the committee considers the Local Government Finance Act 1988, Prescription of Non-Domestic Rating Multipliers, England Regulations 2026, which prescribes the circumstances in which the new retail, hospitality and leisure and high-value business rates multipliers apply. It is a pleasure to see you in the chair, Dr. Morrison, and I want to... No? No, well, that's totally wrong. Who have we got in the chair?
Keep going.
Keep going.
Mr. Mundell.
Mr. Mundell, that's right. Mr. Mundell, forgive me for my sins. I do not know what I do. And I also want to let members know that I don't plan on speaking for 15 minutes today, as I did the other day in the chamber. You'll be glad to know. The purpose of the legislation before you today is to give effect to the new business rates multipliers for qualifying retail, hospitality and leisure and high-value properties. This is the first step to creating a fairer business rate system that protects the high street, supports investment and is fit for the 21st century. At the budget, we announced a comprehensive set of reforms to business rates. We created a new, fairer system with permanently lower multipliers for RHL, retail, hospitality and leisure properties, with rateable values below £500,000. The scope of these new multipliers is broadly the same as the scope for the current RHL relief. These new multipliers will be 5 pence below their national equivalents. However, when combined with the outcomes of the revaluation, the tax rate that RHL properties on the small business multiplier will pay next year will fall by nearly 12p, and the rate for RHL properties on the standard multiplier will fall by 12.5p compared to what they are paying now. It's important we make support for the high street sustainable, and so we're funding these new multipliers through higher rates on the top 1% of properties, those with rateable values of 500,000 and above, and the higher multiplier will only be 2.8% above the national standard multiplier, meaning properties in scope will pay a reasonable tax rate too. These new rates are worth almost £1 billion a year and will benefit over 750,000 RHL properties. They will mean that from April, the most valuable properties, such as large distribution warehouses occupied by online giants, will pay a tax rate that is 33% higher than that paid by small high street properties. The new business rates multipliers brought into force by these statutory instruments are the first step to creating a fairer business rate system that protects the high street, supports investment and is fit for the 21st century. I commend them to the committee and forgive me, Chair.
Forgive me. The question is that the committee has considered the draft Local Government Finance Act 1988, Prescription of Non-Domestic Rating Multipliers, England Regulations 2026, and I call Shadow Minister James Wyland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mundell. It's a pleasure to see you in the chair, and I'll speak to the two sets of regulations together that set out the new tiered business rate system for the 2026 financial year. And in plain English, the first regulation defines who gets which business rate multiplier under the new system, and the second sets out how much large premises will pay. Of course, ahead of the election, the Prime Minister said there would be a new regime of permanently lower business rates. Indeed, at the budget, referring to these measures, the Chancellor said the tax rates for business rates are at their lowest level since 1991. But the reality, Mr. Mundell, is proving somewhat different. Businesses are facing major increases. Claims to the contrary are false. Their bills are going up. That's why I, along with the Housing Secretary and the Shadow Business Secretary, have written to the Office of Statistics Regulation, as it's statistically misleading to make the claim of record low taxes on the basis of the multipliers, as these are not the tax rates. And I was pleased to have confirmation on Friday, Mr. Mundell, that the Office of Statistics Regulation is looking into this matter as we speak. Turning to the regulations, in its first budget, the Labour government chose to cut back retail, hospitality and leisure rate relief introduced by the last Conservative government from 75% to 40%. That was a tax raise of £1.1 billion a year. Now, through the legislation and bringing forward these measures, they have axed that relief in its entirety, meaning higher bills, and the government has also locked in automatic inflation-linked rises every single year. And what's the result going to be of that? Well, the OBR expects business rate receipts to increase by £3.5 billion next year, a 10% increase in a single year. For small and medium-sized businesses, this position is incredibly challenging. Take the average independent pub. Its bill will rocket from £4,000 in 24-25 to nearly £10,000 by 28-29, a rise of 144%. The position for shops, hotels and restaurants is worse indeed than that. At this point, it's usual that ministers, indeed this minister, would claim that the last Conservative government would simply have abolished the relief overnight. Of course, that is utter nonsense, and I welcome the opportunity to get that on the record. It's simply a desperate attempt to deflect from what we can see are the bad political choices that the Chancellor and her ministers have made. As it said in the Conservative Party manifesto, we would continue to ease the burden of business rates for high streets, leisure and hospitality businesses, and our record is one of supporting this sector and the people creating jobs across the country. Under the new system set out in these regulations, combined with the revaluation, businesses across retail, leisure and hospitality face much higher bills, and fewer will actually benefit compared to the 40% relief, because under that scheme, as is set out in the explanatory notes members will have seen, local authorities had more discretion over which premises benefited from the relief. Can the Minister tell us what estimate the Treasury and the VAO undoubtedly would have provided to the Treasury the number of businesses that won't get that relief under the discretionary powers that were there in the first place? Of course, the rates of the small and standard multipliers are set in separate regulations, Mr Mundell, so I won't dwell on those in this debate. But 2 months on from the budget, we've already seen a partial reversal on the plans the Chancellor set out, despite the promises of lower multipliers and lower bills. The ministers may point to their pubs and live music relief as if it solves the problem, but it does not. It's a sticking plaster when there is a major flesh wound the Chancellor has caused. It covers just 38,000 out of 750,000 hospitality and leisure businesses, barely 1 in 20. And it excludes restaurants, cafes, shops, hotels and theatres and all of those venues that will have been in touch with all members across the committee. And 1 in 4 pubs will still pay more overall, even after that relief. But guess what? That relief is only temporary, indeed a sticking plaster. And the ministers previously said there'd be no further support for the wider sector. Well, we all hope that he has to come back to the House with that package soon enough, or perhaps the Chancellor will actually do it herself when she delivers her spring update. The second regulations actually set the rate for the new high value multiplier. That will be 2.8p in the pound, and the standard multiplier will be 48p, and the high value multiplier 58.8p. And big online warehouses with a rateable value of £500,000 are supposedly the target, but I believe twice as many retail sites, often acting as anchors for our high streets, will now face this higher rate. That's not what Labour promised before the election. They said they would replace the business rate system, raising the same revenue in a fairer way and levelling the playing field between high streets and online giants. Can the Minister explain why the government is targeting anchor retail stores that are so important to our wider high streets? And of course, these higher rates come on top of higher employment costs, increased alcohol duties, the new tourist tax on hotels and B&Bs, a measure that UK hospitality warns could cost consumers £518 million if they take up the powers, the mayors take up the powers given to them by the government. To conclude, Mr Mundell, we would take a very different approach. We would deliver permanent 100% business rate relief for retail, hospitality and leisure businesses of up to £110,000, helping around 250,000 small businesses, and we would pay for it by controlling the welfare budget. We believe on this side in backing those taking a risk, employing people and investing. Thank you.
Well, Minister, to respond to the debate.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, let me come back on some of the points raised by the Shadow Minister. It is worth just emphasising here that the decision to introduce new tax rates into the system mean that for the first time now, the typical business on a high street has a lower multiplier, a lower tax rate than the online giants and those larger properties. Actually, the larger properties, their tax rate is 33% higher than the tax rate paid by a smaller property on the high street. That's a big and a significant difference, and it's the first step of our reforms to business rates that we've implemented. I won't make the point that the previous government would have removed the reliefs overnight, but I will say that if they were planning on keeping them, then I don't understand why it wasn't in the documents published by the OBR in advance of the general election. It seems like the Shadow Minister is suggesting that there was a multi-billion-pound unfunded tax cut that they didn't tell us about before the election. If he doesn't want to concede that they would have got rid of it overnight, I'm not sure which one he'd prefer it to be. On the high-value multiplier and large retail stores being included in it, this was of course something we considered in advance of the budget, and actually it was really encouraging to see that Sainsbury's, the Co-op, Iceland and other large retailers welcomed the fact that we made sure we got the balance right within the business rate system and were able to set the multiplier at a rate that meant that some of these shops, so that they would be able to reduce prices in the shops, or at least hold down price increases for consumers because of the changes that we made and because of the proportionate way in which we went about it. Let me add, to conclude, that we're also committed to go further to reform the business rate system. We published at the budget a call for evidence on how to remove further barriers to investment, and transforming business rates is a multi-year process. The government remains firmly committed to collaborating with stakeholders, small businesses and large, throughout this process to continue to work on how we can achieve further meaningful change in the business rate system.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft Local Government Finance Act 1988, Prescription of Non-Domestic Rating Multipliers England Regulations 2026. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.
The draft Local Government Finance Act 1988, Calculation of Non-Domestic Rating High-Value Multiplier England Regulations 2026.
Minister to move formally.
Formally.
The question is that the committee has considered the draft Local Government Finance Act 1988, Calculation of Non-Domestic Rating High-Value Multiplier England Regulations 2026. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order.